Hello everybody, welcome back to the Helix. Today we've got the whole list of M15 cards. So, let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about are the 4 new Planeswalkers we have available to us. Ajani the Steadfast, Nessa Worldwaker, Jace the Living Guildpack, and Garruk the Apex Predator. Garruk and Nessa in particular seem very powerful, and even though Garruk costs 7 mana, I think he'll see his day killing Elspeth and some of her friends, and then also making 3/3s doesn't seem bad either. And overall, I just feel like Nessa's a very strong card in the format. Moving on to our next powerhouse cards for Mythics, we have the Soul cards, spitting out more card advantage than you can pay for, and at the cost that makes it simple to you, just 5 or 6 per each, with Soul of Ravnica being the top at 7. And these abilities are just as relevant in the graveyard. But speaking of power, Silver Hive Lord might just be the powerful sliver the deck needed. Alongside Silver Hive and Mana Confluence, this deck might just spit out enough multicolored mana to make this huge juggernaut that makes all your creatures indestructible, and that for one seems like a powerful ability to me. And while it's in the format, Mana of Sliver makes this card look easy. But slivers aren't stopping there, slivers are also getting some other powerful abilities to go alongside, and while M14 is in the format, I think M15 is going to make slivers more of a possibility than it ever was. But moving away from slivers, Return to the Ranks has become one of my most favorite cards in the set, and there's some very interesting targets printed here as well, such as Quickling, Phyrexian Revoker, an interesting reprint indeed, and Generator Servant, which allows you to give anything haste, at the cost of 2 less even. Alongside these just powerful cards are Wall of Mulch and Wall of Essence. Wall of Mulch allows you to sacrifice itself or Wall of Essence to draw a card, which is an interesting thing when you can bring them back for very cheaply as well. And overall, it's interactions like this that make Return to the Ranks a very interesting card indeed. And moving on to a bit of a disappointment, Waste Not turned out to be not the great card I want it to be. Waste Not does things, but not at the speed I want them to, because when I want to discard cards from my opponent's hand, I'm casting Wait Not instead. And when I've done that, I've been slow enough to where I've let them cast what they wanted to. And this doesn't seem like a very good interaction. And overall, when you do cast it and you do discard stuff successfully, you're probably only getting 2, if at most 3 interactions off this anyway. So overall, I'm going to call Waste Not a bust. But moving on to cards I don't think are going to be a bust, Perilous Vault and Aether Spouts seem to be some of the best field wipers we've had in a very long time. It'll be an interesting twist on Day of Judgment, or cards like it, to have cards like these in the format. But Mono Red is getting a little juice as well, with cards like Stoke the Flames and Bloodseeker giving the deck even more tools. Stoke the Flames seems like a very powerful card that can deal 4 damage to anything you want, at the Convoke usually making it 3 at the most. And then Bloodseeker allows you to give itself haste, +2/+0, and first strike every time a creature on your opponent's side of the field hits the bucket. And interactions like this, with other cards in the format, make this deck very promising. But speaking of interactions, Shrapnel Blast and Darksteel Citadel are in the same standard format, which means once again we can see a 2-mana spell, sacrifice a land to deal 5. And Soul Artifact seems like a very powerful Tezzeret Agent of Bolas ability for 2 mana, meaning that you can turn any artifact into a 5/5. And then Ornithopter is also going to be in the format, meaning that these cards even have more ammo. A few other good standard cards for the set are Reclamation Sage and Dissipate. Dissipate gives you a great way to deal with the soul cards that removes them from play after you counter them. And then Reclamation Sage can deal with a lot of the Theros cards, along with some of the powerful artifact cards seen in the set. Speaking of dealing with powerful threats, Polymorphous Jest and Turn to Frog can turn anything into a frog, meaning that it has no abilities and is just a 1/1. And overall, I think that Polymorphous Jest in particular has a lot of utility. M15 also has some interesting commons, such as Underworld Scavenger, Evolving Wilds being reprinted for the first time in a while now, and finally Shields, which can become an interesting version of Apostle's Blessing. But Evolving Wilds isn't our only mana fixer in the set, we're also having the Pain lands being reprinted in all the enemy cycle. These have always seemed like great lands to decks that can kill their opponent fast enough to where they can afford to lose the life. But speaking of previously modern legal cards, Court of Calling and Ulamog Tomb of Yawmoth are now standard legal, and this time not at $40, as they have been in Modern for almost approaching a year now. But speaking of modern and older formats than that, Goblin Robomaster and Hushwing Griff seem like great cards for those formats that need a little bit more utility than the average card uses. And overall, I feel like these are the 2 most solid cards for the whole set in those older formats. Well, that's all I have to say about M15, outside of it probably being the best core set we've had since Revised. And it looks like this next turn format is going to be a great one. Well, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, Jesus loves you.